Hi, everyone. Hi, Pam. I see you walking around in your kitchen.
Hey,
I
how are
also
you?
saw, how's it going?
Um, we got here, so it's going.
Good deal. It's good to see you. I also saw Ann Kosachev on here and Sam. I see a Dave McCormick, but I think that might be a Pam duplicate. And the only person I think I might not know is a Sean.
Victoria was
But
going to come, but she got called into work, so I had the computer up. At least if she gets here, she can just.
great. Well, it's nice to see everybody here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Laura Ellsworth. I was born and raised in Bethel and moved away for a year. And I'm now working with the Bethel Council on the Arts. And hi, Anne. And we are co-hosting this workshop with the Rasmuson Foundation to give a little bit of information to all of you artists about these upcoming individual artist award grants, how to apply for them, how to be successful in applying for them, and how to kind of make it a little bit maybe more palatable, have small little bites of the application that you work on, and have some resources and support along the way. And with that, I'm going to introduce Tristan Agnarok Morgan. She's an Inupiat artist and a program fellow at the Rasmussen Foundation. It's her second year assisting with the IIA program, and so she is going to take it over from here.
Hi everyone, welcome. I wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement. Rasmussen is based here in Anchorage, Alaska. We know that you're on different Indigenous land in the southwest region. I'm trying to map in my head, but I just wanted to do a land acknowledgement from here from Rasmussen. So we are on traditional Dena'ina Athlena, Dena'ina Athabascan land. Wanted to give a thank you from the Anchorage region to the village of Eklutna, just a little bit north of Anchorage, and its people for allowing us to gather here on their land today. So definitely thank you to Dena'ina Athabascan people, and also thank you to the Indigenous people of the Southwest region for allowing us to gather on our land and to thank the original stewards of the land. And my name is Tristan Agnarok Morgan, Umaga Agnarok, Sagavan Koyak, Nagavana Koyak, Ulavanag Miranga. My Inupiaq name is Agnarok. My family names are Sagavan and Nagavana. My family is from Wainwright, Alaska. It's all the way at the top, just west of Ukagavik. And I have been with Rasmussen 2 years now, so second year helping out with IAA. And I'm also a practicing Inupiaq artist here in Anchorage. And I'm going to pass it to my co-host, Inzina Murari, to introduce herself and to introduce the rest of Rasmussen.
Thank you so much, Tristan. We are so excited to share this virtual space with you all this evening. My name is Enzina Murari, she, her. I am also a practicing artist. I practice across disciplines, and I'm a program officer at the foundation and have been working on the Individual Artist Awards for the last 2 years. It's such a fantastic opportunity for artists to really show their passion and their skill and craft in the work that they do and what they bring to Alaska, and to reflect the pride in our community and in our culture here. I also wanted to introduce a couple Rasmussen Foundation support staff we have on the call. We have Zuli Mason. Zuli is providing a lot of program support, has been involved in the Individual Artist Awards for many years. And we have Karen Lowell. Karen is also a practicing artist. Karen has been providing direct artist support for the program for the last 2 years, and just let us know before the call that she's already spoken to about 100 artists who have questions about the process. And Karen is usually the first person that you'll talk to if you reach out to us, and we'll repeat this email address often throughout the night, but arts, ARTS at rasmussen.org. If you have internet connectivity, that will get you straight to Karen, and then Karen can also include some other contact in the chat. Speaking of chat, if folks are not familiar with Zoom, just a couple of tips. If you scroll to your bar and see the bar that says more, if you click on more, it will bring up the chat box. And that's where we ask if you're able to post any questions that come up for you during this first part. The workshop tonight has two main parts. The first part is an introduction into the program, so some base information. It's about 30-45 minutes, and then we'll have some time for questions. We'll take a break, 10-minute break, and then we'll jump into the hands-on workshop. And so we ask that if you don't have it now, that during that break to get a pen and a paper, because we're actually going to go through and start workshopping some of the questions that appear in the application. If you don't really know what you are thinking about in terms of your project, that's okay. We'll give some examples of how to do those workshopping elements when we get there. But we do ask that you reserve all of your questions until we get to those question and answer segments of the different parts of the evening tonight. We also ask that you keep your Zoom on mute. We've been having a lot of feedback when there's more than one microphone on at a time. And so we also thank you for your patience and grace as we navigate any technical issues that may come up this evening. And you're welcome to keep your camera on or off to your comfort level. We do ask that when we move into the workshopping component that you turn your camera on so that we can mimic being in a group together and getting some feedback from each other. All right, so with that, I am going to share my screen and start bringing us through, and Tristan will talk us through our agenda.
So we'll go over the foundation history and then go over a brief overview of the individual artist awards, and then take a 10-minute break and then go into the workshops. So if you have been, I don't think anyone here has been in the informational before, but it's similar to how we've given the informational meetings prior to this meeting we have here. And then again, that workshop begins at 7 o'clock. And that's where we'll be able to really go through and work some things out with each other as a group. Zina?
Great, thank you so much, Tristan. So we just wanted to open the night a little bit with a discussion about why we're working with the Bethel Arts Council. And for the past several years, we've been working with the Community Service Foundation. And what we found is that through constant evaluation of the program, we are looking at ways to make it better. And we're looking at ways to make it more representative and reflective of all of the artists working across Alaska. As Tristan noted, the foundation is set, our offices are set in Anchorage, but it's a statewide program. And we want the award program, the individual artist awards, to reflect artists statewide. We don't want it to be centric. We don't want it to be centered around a specific discipline, visual arts or written work. We want it to be broad and comprehensive. We also want to make sure that we're reaching people who maybe don't have access to the foundation or access to things that might be a little bit more challenging, like filling out a grant. And so we reached out to specific groups this year that we noticed were underrepresented, whether it was a specific discipline or a specific discipline or a specific. And through a lot of those conversations, we've been learning about the different challenges and strengths and needs. We have our own challenges and strengths and needs. And one of the challenges we had is that people who apply to the program are people who know about the program and already know. But we could do as much advertising as we want, and if people are not familiar with us, they're not going to. So that was a challenge that we were trying to face this year by reaching out to partners like Bethel Arts Council and some other partners throughout the state. And so, Laura, if you don't mind, I'd like to bounce it over to you, and you can share with us some of the strengths, challenges, needs that you see from artists working within your region.
Yeah. This is the first year that I've been working directly with the program and reaching out to artists. So I might not have quite the depth of um, ability to speak to this, but just from what I've heard this year so far, I've spoke to a lot of artists who maybe are working artists and they create a piece and then they sell the piece and then they create another piece and they sell the piece. So they've had this lifetime of work, but maybe it hasn't necessarily been documented. So trying to find representations within their artwork, nice photographs or things where it can show like a progression if they're working on a smaller item and then working up to a bigger item. They don't have the access to those items anymore because they've been sold. And so when an application asks for 5 pieces of some of your strongest work, they say, well, I've got some really great work out there, but I don't know where it is anymore because I've already sold it. So that's one of the things. And I've been speaking with artists and just trying to talk to them about maybe just having an eye towards documenting as they go along. That was one thing that came up a couple of times. And then other artists, I think this might not be generally to artists in the YK Delta, but for artists in general, it's there are a lot of applicants to this grant and there aren't a ton of awardees. And so being discouraged because you've applied once or twice and maybe it hasn't come to the outcome that you were hoping for, you didn't get awarded. And so just working through those challenges and realizing that the application is a process and maybe the first year you apply, you don't get it, but you get some great feedback, or you've got a great working draft to start with for the next year, and just seeing the value in that too, I think is important. Kind of starting where you're at and then progressing as you go. And then for artists that are maybe even further outside of Bethel, where English might be their second language, working with an application like of this size and this weight can be a little intimidating, and it just requires outside assistance. So last week we did some interviews with Neva Matthias, and she talked about things that were helpful for her. She said, if English is your second language or you're just not really great at grammar because it's your second language, work with your English teachers, work with people within your community that is their strength and can help you. Or that's also where BCA would love to come alongside you too and try to help you overcome those challenges.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. And please, I put this in the chat. If you feel so inclined, if there's anything that you found yourself that's a unique challenge or strength or you'd like for us to know, please post that in the chat. We are constantly evaluating the program. We take feedback seriously. A lot of the changes that we make are in a direct response to the feedback we get from artists. We want to be the best stewards we can of artists and arts practice in Alaska. And I also just want to let everyone know, Laura posted this in the chat, but this is being streamed live on Facebook. So just a heads up to everyone that we are on Facebook. So just a real quick brief overview of the history of the Rasmuson Foundation. Some of you are familiar with the foundation, some might not. But the foundation is a large statewide philanthropic foundation that invests in a full spectrum of services across Alaska. And overarching of the Rasmussen Foundation is to make a better life for all Alaskans. And they do this by contributing to health and social services, education, homelessness, arts and culture. And so it's pretty broad in terms of the type of giving that occurs. We're here today to talk about arts and culture, but the Rasmussen Foundation can really be traced back to Yakima. And this is when Jenny Olsen Rasmussen, who was a Swedish immigrant, came to Alaska. And in Yakima, she met her husband, E.A. Rasmussen, who was also a Swedish immigrant, came to Yakima as a teacher. They married, had a son, Elmer. The family went into banking. They ran the Bank of Alaska, and that's where they developed much of their wealth. And then at Elmer's passing in 2011, developed much of that wealth was left to the Rasmuson Foundation, which started the giving that I just spoke about. And the family's value in arts and culture has been a present and consistent value. When Elmer was running the Bank of Alaska, he was an early collector and supporter of art and found that lots of people were buying art, Alaska Native arts and artifacts, taking them out of the state. So he developed a collection to keep those artworks and artifacts in the state. The Alaska Heritage Museum that's located in Wells Fargo in Anchorage. And so arts is a family value and has been a consistent value for the foundation. Tristan now is going to talk a little bit specifically about those arts and culture investments, which is why we're here to talk tonight.
So in 2004, Rasmussen Foundation created an arts and culture initiative to really help artists. Like we wanted to help individual artists. And so this program is really unique in that sense. So we have kind of this little infographic here where we fund individual artists within the Individual Artist Award, but we also work in arts and culture within organizations, so within nonprofits across Alaska, helping with that, and also in communities. So we are working with Bethel Council on the Arts today, co-hosting with this workshop, but we also work with the statewide Alaska Council on the Arts as well, and we'll be going over a few other opportunities later on with that you can apply for as an artist as well. So this is it goes from a small kind of little hub to a larger hub to then a statewide hub of kind of where we are pushing funds to help with arts and culture.
Awesome. Thanks, Tristan. So as Tristan mentioned, the Arts and Culture Initiative started in 2004, and that contribution directly to artists came through lots of conversations about the best way to invest in arts and culture in Alaska. And the board really determined that the best way to invest in arts and culture in a broad way is to put money directly in the hands of artists. And that's what really gave birth to the Individual Artist Awards program. And it's important to note that the Individual Artist Awards program is one of the two programs in the foundation that funds individuals. Every other program is to organizations, tribal entities, or local government. And so this program is really unique. It's directly in artists. And Tristan will talk a little bit more about the purpose of the individual.
So as seen in the last slide, it's really to allow dedicated time and resources for serious artistic exploration and growth for those individual artists. And we'll go into depth on exactly what that looks like, but really to strengthen Alaska's cultural resources from the ground up. So since 2004, the program has provided over 550 grants to artists, representing over 50 communities throughout Alaska. So while we do have a lot of communities, a lot of artists represented within the Individual Artist Awards, we can always do better, and that's why we're here today. And the three awards that we're going to be talking about are the Distinguished Artist Award, and then the Project Awards and Fellowship. And the Distinguished Artist Award is separate from the Project Award and Fellowship, so we'll briefly cover that. But really what we're going to be focusing on today are the Project Awards and the Fellowships and what that looks like, because you guys are applying for that, or hopefully applying, or thinking about applying, or know someone who's applying. So, Yanzina. Just kidding, it's my slide. I did this twice. So the three award types are the Fellowship Award, the Project Award, and Distinguished Artist Award. As said in the last slide, the Fellowship is $18,000, 10 unrestricted grants for a short-term project. Short-term project means 1 year. So both the Fellowship Award and the Project Award are 1 year. And then the Project Award is $7,500, and that's a little less competitive. It's 25 grants, and that's for that year-long duration as well. But that's for projects, as opposed to a fellowship, which is just a little bit different. It's a little bit confusing if you don't know exactly what a fellowship is. in terms of a project award, but we'll explain kind of what those differences are. And then the Distinguished Artist Award, which again, that's completely separate process from the Fellowship and Project Award. That is for one distinguished artist that's given for out. We've already ended the 2021 process for that, and that's selected by nomination. So Enzina will go over the Distinguished Artist Award and in that nomination process, but that has already ended, and that will be shared alongside all of the fellowship awards and the project awards when those are announced. So that's a different panel process, but that's something to keep in mind for 2022. If you do know a distinguished artist, we'll go over that. And a quick shout out to Lily Hope for creating all of these beautiful award necklaces, and pointing out Karen, because Karen is also wearing some Lily Hope earrings. So just a quick shout out to Lily Hope for creating these wonderful, beautiful necklaces. And the three artistic career stages are the emerging, the mid-career, and the mature. And those are going to be really important when you first start off applying for the grant application, and we'll go over what that looks like as well.
Yeah, so real quick, we just wanted to shout out, we know this isn't a comprehensive list of Southwest region recipients, but we did want to highlight a few folks who've received awards in the last few years. We have Marie Mead, who is a 2019 Project Award recipient from Bethel area, and Stephen Quachong Blanchette, who's originally from Bethel. He received a fellowship. We have Nia Matthias, who is from Chivak, who received a fellowship, and Noah Lincoln from Tuktuk Bay, who received a project award. Again, this isn't comprehensive of all artists from the Southwest region who've received an award, but we just wanted to highlight a few folks who have received awards from this region in the last few years. We also wanted to give a snapshot and be fully transparent about the type of applications and number of applications that we get. Any year we get anywhere from 300 to 500 total applications, a big range. Last year we had closer to 300. Tristan talked a little bit about the two main types of awards, the project awards, you see the numbers here, and the fellowship. There are only 35 total awards out of 300 or 400 people who apply. So it's very, very competitive. And every year there are tremendous, fabulous, fantastic artists that don't get an award. Laura spoke a little bit about that challenge of applying and not being successful, but it's just very competitive. I also talked a little bit about why we're reaching out to certain organizations. We reached out to the Performing Arts and Dance Organization because of the applications last year, there were only 3 applications from choreographers throughout the state. And we know that there are more than 3 fabulous dance artists working in Alaska. And so we knew that we needed to do better and reach out to those individuals. And part of the challenge too is this, some people have this idea that it's a visual arts program, but it is a creative, artistic practice, creative making program. So whatever your discipline is, it will usually fit within the discipline structure that we have. And Tristan will go over all of the 11 disciplines shortly. But you'll see that there are 4 applications in presentation, 10 in folk and traditional arts. So we know that these are some areas that we need to reach out to certain individuals. And the same is true for fellowships. Again, some of the highest applications we see come from visual arts, come from music, come from literary arts. And then some of those other disciplines are much fewer. And these, again, are total applications, the award recipients, the total applications of the full amount. And then just a little deeper dive into the project award and fellowship. So Tristan mentioned the project awards are the $7,500 grant. It is the smaller of the 2 awards, and it is a set grant amount. So it's $7,500. an artist cannot apply for lower or more at 7,500. It's available to all of those 11 disciplines that I just talked about, and Tristan will go into more detail next. And it is for a short-term project, so something that can be done in a year. We are being more flexible this year because of the pandemic with timelines, but we are really, really encouraging folks to take on projects or concepts or ideas that can be achieved through the uncertainty of this next year. And so, sometimes people will apply for lots of travel, and we know that travel might be compromised. So if someone's applying for a project that might be dependent on travel restrictions or the trajectory of the pandemic, to always include a plan B in your proposal, but really to think about what can you do within our current times that's achievable. You have to include a project budget. That budget has to meet $7,500 for a project award. We get lots and lots of questions about a budget. Karen is really great at providing some insight into what you can claim in your budget that you might not realize as part of your art making, part of your practice, like internet expense or phone expense or like rental space or childcare. So if you have questions about a project budget, what's eligible expenses, let us know. And there are about 25 project awards. So there are more project awards than fellowships, but compared to the total applications, it's still pretty small. Fellowships are the $18,000 award, so they're the larger, and these are mostly unrestricted. That means that it doesn't necessarily need to be a set project. It can be really any undertaking that's going to advance the career, advance the growth, advance the development of the artist. The difference with fellowships, there's a couple, in addition to the award amount, but the fellowship is only available to mid-career or mature. And I already saw some questions coming in the chat about career stage, which kind of tricky to figure out. But mid-career or mature artists, those are artists that are deeply rooted into their craft. They've been working for decades. They've been working at an advanced level. They have some type of acknowledgement or recognition to show that they've been working for a long time. Emerging artist is someone who is established in their practice, but they're early on in their career. So they have an established portfolio that has been done separate of instruction. They've made some progress in their career, but they're just starting out. So they're early, but they do have an established portfolio. Again, there's only 10 fellowships, so it is a little bit more competitive. And the fellowship disciplines vary from year to year. So only half of those 11 disciplines are eligible every other year. So any discipline can apply for a project award every year, but disciplines are about half of the list. And in 2021, this year, it's choreography, crafts, folk and traditional arts, literary arts, and performance arts. And Tristan will take us through those disciplines next.
So here is a nice list of all of the 11 artistic disciplines. As Indina said in the last slide, the top 5 are the ones that are available for fellowship this year. And then next year, it will be the bottom 6. So it does flip-flop each year. So if there is a fellowship that you want to apply for, but it's within, let's say, music composition, and you want to apply for a fellowship, you will have to apply for next year if you want to apply for that fellowship. So just keep that in mind. It just gives you a little bit more time to focus in on your fellowship and get things gathered together. But the top 5 are the ones for the fellowship. And so these are, we understand that you're going to have, that you might fit into several of these disciplines. So a choreographer can also go into presentation interpretation, depending on how they interpret themselves. So this is really based off of what you believe you fit into. So we do have a description within the guidelines of all 11 disciplines, and we suggest that you go through that, read them through with someone else to try and see which one really speaks to you as an artist. And just like with visual arts, if your practice is rooted within a tradition, you may want to apply under folk and traditional arts. So the panel is split up based off of which discipline. So you'll want to be put within the discipline that you feel you fit in best, because that's where you're going to move through the application with the panel. Is going to be first within that discipline, and then moving forward, the panel then speaks with each other, and Dina will go over that within the next few slides. But so these are the 11 disciplines, all of them available for project award for that $7,500 award, and then only the top 5 with 2021 for the fellowships. So if you have any questions about whether you fit into one, or you're not sure and you want to fit into another, please reach out to us and we can help you out with that. We want to make sure that you are within the discipline that you feel most comfortable in. We've gotten the question too of what if I put myself in the wrong discipline? You're not going to have a panelist who is familiar with that discipline. So it may be a little bit difficult for them, and it has happened before, and it is a hindrance for the applicant. It's not an end all be all, but we want to make sure that you're within the discipline that you believe you belong in. And this is a empowering for the artists. So this is definitely something that you're yes. End of sentence. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that a little bit. You know, it's super important to pick a discipline that is most true to your practice as an artist. Sometimes some folks might have a strategy like, oh, well, it's performance arts year. I'm going to apply under performance art, even though I'm a musician. But the work is really rooted in music, in making music and performing music. It's not performance art, which is rooted in kind of a multidisciplinary fine art performance utilizing, individuals and expression. So, the challenge with that is just what Tristan was saying, that we have discipline-specific panelists reviewing your work. And if it's in the wrong discipline, if it's in the very wrong discipline, it may be ineligible as an application. But it also might be viewed by panelists that are not going to be viewing it based on that criteria. And so it does a disservice. So really look at those guidelines. I think Karen can post them in the chat to think about where your work is rooted and apply there. That's going to be the best thing you do for your application. So we'll move quickly through the next slides. We do want to give time for some questions that are coming on before we break for part 2. One of the things that we did, and I think this might answer one of the questions in the chat, one of the things we did last year was expand who can apply to the program. Historically, artists working independently. We realized that was not, that was creating a barrier for a lot of artists that work collaboratively, and we wanted to honor the collaborative, collective nature of art making. So last year we expanded the program to include groups or collectives. So it could be a dance group or a dance team that's been working together for years and years and years. Or it could be a collective of 3 different artists from different disciplines coming together for one project and then dissolving after that. It's just 2 or more people. But though that group, it's still under the same criteria. So everyone has to be, and Tristan will talk about criteria. Everyone has to be 18 or older in the group. Everyone has to be Alaskan or from Alaska. If the careers, the career stages need to align. So there's a career stage, emerging, mid-career, or mature for the group as a group, not for individuals. So all of the same criteria applies as it would to an individual group. And there are some specific guidelines when it comes to the application. So if you're in a group or collaborative, please read those guidelines particular to that and reach out to us if you have any.
So to go over the eligibility for the Individual Artist Award, you do need to be an Alaskan resident. This is an Alaskan award. You do need to be living in Alaska for at least 2 years and then also remain a resident during the duration of the grant. So similar to applying for the PFD. You need to be an adult, so 18 years or older, and then currently producing work. Currently producing work does not mean you need to be a full-time artist. We know a lot of artists have to sustain themselves and sustain their artistic practices. So that does not apply to, that applies, you can apply if you are a part-time artist. Um, People who aren't individual or not eligible are going to be individuals enrolled in any degree seeking program related to the arts. So if you are going to university um, within the arts, then you will not be able to apply, and you will also not be able to use any work that you made during your time within the degree seeking program. So if you are a recent graduate, you will not be able to use any of your work that you created while you're in the degree seeking program. This doesn't apply if you are in a degree seeking program for another field completely. If you're within STEM, you don't have to worry about any work in terms of that non-eligibility portion. And then the work cannot be primarily of research, scholarly, or commercial nature. And Zena will add on to that as well because she has a really great information on that. And it's also not a needs-based grant. So we know that there's a lot of need right now for artists within the state and nationally because of COVID-19. But this is not a needs-based grant. There is a needs-based grant that we will be touching on that you can apply for. But the individual artist awards have been happening since 2004, and they will hopefully be happening after COVID-19. So it's not needs-based. And the criteria is artistic quality given experience. We are going to compare your work as an emerging artist to a artist who has mature in the sense of not having that longevity. The criteria also the creative accomplishments, the impact on your growth, how is this going to propel you forward as an artist, and then also the completeness of the application. We'll go into detail about that as well. And Zena, did you want to touch on the commercial nature?
Yeah, this is such a tricky question. And we know that artists need to sell work to make a living. And so we don't see that part, that kind of commercial exchange as a commercial nature. We're talking more about business versus individual art practice. And so one clear cut example, we know there's a ton of gray, but one clear example that we often give is there is a graphic designer. Graphic design is an eligible visual arts discipline. There's a graphic designer that works for a design firm. The samples they use are all the samples that they had done for their job for the business. So advertisements, logos, etc. They're applying for a project to buy equipment to improve their craft for the business. So all of that benefit would go to the business and it wouldn't go to them as an individual. That's a commercial business, it's a commercial practice. So that's what we say as commercial. Is it mass produced? Is it a business? Not the business side of being an artist, but is it a business of itself that isn't investing in the artist's individual growth in their individual art practice? So I do want to keep us on track a little bit. I'm gonna, in just a moment, I'm gonna turn it over to Laura to kind of go through the chat and lead us through some questions. And while she's getting that squared away, I'll just talk a little bit about the panel process. Tristan mentioned this. We work with an outside panel of experts every year. Every year it's a different panel. The panel is diverse representation of, we can't say of Alaska because they're all out of Alaska, but we try to match the diversity and richness of our state, of our disciplines, of different groups within our panel. And they are working artists, they're practicing artists, they are experts, educators, they work for foundations, they are doing the work in the arts. And every year there's a new panel and they're reviewing the applications. It's a very thorough process with several stages. And they're looking for the same criteria that you're looking for in your application. So artistic quality given your career stage and experience, accomplishments thus far, impact the project will have on your growth, the recognition of the award will have on your growth, and whether or not your application is complete. So with that, I do want to give us some time for questions before we take our break. Lisa, can I turn it over to you to filter some of those questions that came up?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. This is Laura again from the BCA. I saw a number of people write in the chat, which is awesome. It sounds like you guys are working through some of the questions that have come up as you've gone through the application. Anne had mentioned not exactly knowing which portion to put herself into, whether she would be a professional artist, emerging artist, or career artist. And I think Zena talked a little bit to that. And if you still have questions, feel free to post that in the chat. But it sounds like for the fellowship, you're really looking at artists that have been doing it for a number of years, that may have had special awards or accommodations or accomplishments that are tied to their lifelong career of work. So from what you had said, it seems to align for yourself specifically more for the 7,500 project award, but we can talk about that more later. And if you feel differently, definitely comment in the chat. And then
Yeah,
the
and
other-
Laura, I can chime in on that too.
Sure.
You know, I think it's like thinking about the emerging mid-career or mature, it's going to vary depending on your specific discipline and depending on your craft for the different accomplishments or kind of markers of how to put yourself in that right category. But an emerging artist is someone who is, you know, they have an established practice, but they're just starting out. Mid-career, you've been working for several years, you know, maybe you've been working for 10 years in your craft. You've done a lot of different kind of targets, whether you're visual arts, you've exhibited your work or you've performed your work, you've partnered, you've been recognized, acknowledged in other ways. And then mature is someone who is at a very, very advanced level of their practice. Laura, I'm so sorry. I knew I was going to mess up someone's name today.
No worries there. I figured that you were referring to me. Thanks for that clarification, Enzina. I think another thing that was brought up was just finding the time to reapply each year after you've applied once or twice or 3 times and haven't been awarded. And one thing I just had to say to that was every year the panelists change, the judges change. And so if you have a really good start on your application that you've presented one year that didn't give you the success you needed, generally there's some feedback at the end of that process. You can look over the feedback the panelists have given you, maybe make some tweaks where you're not starting your application all over from scratch, but you're just kind of refining what you've already started, and then resubmit that the following year. You don't need to kind of reinvent the entire wheel, just continue revising and resubmitting, knowing that you're going to have a fresh pair of eyes looking at it. So I hope that's helpful for some of you too. What other questions did we have? It looks like someone was asking about just Alaskan eligibility, and you do have to be a resident for the last 2 years. So that is one of the basic requirements. So if you aren't, maybe wait until you are and then consider applying then. It's all really good information to know right now, even if you don't meet that metric. You can start working on your application now, and then when you do meet that Alaskan resident metric, then you're all ready to go for that year's application. And I think that might have been most of the questions in the chat. Feel free to add more if I've missed anything or post it in.
I'm just going to pop on here real quick. It's important to go through in the guidelines. All of the questions for the application are towards the back, and it's a pretty robust application. And so we totally empathize with folks who say, oh, it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of input and it's hard to get rejected. I am also willing to look over what you've written. If you're concerned about any of the written components, you know, we can help you. I can offer suggestions to make it stronger. It's also great to just run it by other people, you know, friends who know you, other artists or makers that are familiar with what you do, somebody who doesn't know about art at all, you know, who can just say, man, this doesn't make any sense, or, oh yeah, totally get that. And it's a constant process over time. So once you get this application kind of worked through, you've got all the pieces. There's a lot of them, but you've got all the components that will not only allow you to apply for these kinds of grants and awards, but for other kinds of funding opportunities. So don't ever think that it's a waste of time if you get rejected. You're actually investing time in the very important work of getting funding for your work. And it just gets stronger the more you do it. And also the less kind of worried you are about it. Like the less worried you are, the more authentic you're going to be. Just stay calm. And it's a terrible long waiting period, but don't put all your eggs in this basket. Just know that every time you go revisit your artist statement or you think about documenting your work, you're making your work stronger. Even if it's not making the actual pieces, you're supporting what you're doing. And we're here to help with that. So email me or call me, okay?
All right.
I had a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I moved here August of 2019. Does that count or no?
So it's a 2-year residency requirement, so same as PFD. So if you qualify for the PFD and if you plan on remaining through next year, then you would qualify.
Okay, thank you.
What if you're a college student and you are out of state for college, but you could still apply for the PFD and still the Alaska driver's license and all that stuff?
Yeah, so we look at some specific residency questions on a case by case, Pam. So I would say reach out to us. It depends too on what you're going to school for. If it intersects with arts at all, then that would just be an ineligibility. You know, we look at certain cases of residency for like military or school, touring musicians. We look at those on a case by case. So reach out to us and we'll take some time and talk with you about that.
Thank you.
I had another question about the 10 pieces of artwork.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to embed those in the application or just send you a link or? Sorry, I'm echoing so much.
No, it's okay, Margaret. Yeah, so in just a minute, we're going to take a break and then we're going to run through the whole application. So the application, you upload all of your images directly into the application online. You can submit a paper application and then you would need to have the images saved on a jump drive or another format that could then be uploaded. But applying online, everything gets uploaded. You can attach your statements. You can write directly into fields where the first thing we're going to do after our break is go over the application and upload your images. And the guidelines have specific directions on the type of work and kind of size limitations to what you can upload. And I think Karen put a link to the paper application in the chat. So, or will put a link to the paper application in the chat so that you can look through that application. All right, so I want to keep us on track. I'm going to pause it there. Oh, I muted myself. I'm going to pause it there and take us to a break. When we get back from our break, we'll go back and talk about the adaptation and innovation grant. Tristan talked about that. I want to make sure we get you all that information. But let's take about a 10-minute break right now. If you do have questions that we didn't get to, please write them down, put them in the chat. We will make sure to get to them before we part. And during this break, you know, I encourage you to get up, walk around, but grab a piece of paper and a pen or pencil because we're going to do some workshopping some of the narrative questions. All right, so I'm going to pause it there and we'll see you back at 7. More of a COVID responsive artist opportunity. And we wanted to let you know about the Adaptation and Innovation Grant Program. And this is one of our organizational partners is the Alaska State Council on the Arts. And so they have a grant program out now. It just started at the end of December. It's available to schools, individual artists, or organizations. And it's really to support artists or organizations in making their work or presenting their work to audiences. So it's pretty flexible. It's more flexible than the Individual Artist Awards program. And it's really responsive to COVID and the pandemic. So it's to adapt your practice and kind of the growing capacity if you need to make things more virtual, if you need to shift kind of your methods so that they can be done during the pandemic, or to innovate ways to operate programs to maintain your practice during this time. And so the individual artist grant, it's $2,000. That's for individual artists. There's also an organizational element. They can apply for that. And then arts and culture organizations can apply for $10,000. So we wanted to let you know about that grant. For an individual artist, again, it's $2,000 to adapt or innovate your practice to be able to keep working. And it's pretty flexible. We encourage you, if you're interested in this, to reach out to Laura Forbes. She's the Director of Education at the State Council and is overseeing this program. She'll be able to talk you through the application. And if you have any questions about how you could use this, she'll be able to answer that. But we definitely wanted to let you know that that is one statewide, more COVID responsive grant that's available. Okay, so part one is going to be a walkthrough of the application, and this is the online application. We do accept paper applications as well, and I believe Karen did post that link, but Tristan is going to start us off with the how to get to the application.
So here is our website from the web view. It does look a little bit different when you are on a phone, but if you are on a computer, this is the Rasmuson webpage, rasmussen.org. On the top ribbon here, you can see grants, initiatives, news about arts, and then grants login. So there are a few ways to get to the Individual Artist Award page. You can go to grants. You can also go to initiatives as well as arts, and all of those will lead you to the Individual Artist Award. We also have a rotating panel. You can see there it says the Individual Artist Awards, and that you can click on as well. So there are several ways that you can get to the Individual Artist Awards landing page. And then moving forward, we'll show you what that looks like. So this is the landing page. So you can see we went through on the top here, home, grants, Individual Artist Awards, and then project awards and fellowship. So here's the landing page. Applications will be accepted through March 1st. On the right here, you can see apply for IAA, and that will take you to the grants login information that you can see up at that top ribbon. And then right underneath apply for IAA are the guidelines. So we highly suggest that you either download that and have that on your computer or on a separate device while you're going through the application, or print it out if you are more of a tactile person. Definitely print out those guidelines, highlight, make notes. Also try and go through those guidelines before you apply as well. Just a nice read through, and then make any notes or any issues that you're running into, and then you can come to us with any questions before you get started, in case you don't want to get stuck right in the middle and then have to call us. So going through the guidelines will make it a little bit easier. Underneath that is the toolkit for artists as well. So that's a toolkit that you can download various resources to help you with setting up your resume. So what your resume should look like, as well as tips and tricks for how to take photos if you don't have a professional photographer on hand. We know that a lot of people don't have, may not have nice cameras. So we have a little resource where you can take photographs from your iPhone or your smartphone. So that's a really great resource for you guys. 1 second. Oops. I had to make my screen bigger. So this is the Rasmussen grants login. So when you click that on the top ribbon, it says grants login in that orange kind of color. This is the Rasmussen Foundation registration. So the bottom part, you see the 501c3. None of us are applying as nonprofits. So you'll go underneath the last two, I mean, for the individual artist registration, and then the art group or collective. So this is where it really matters whether you're applying within a group or a collective, or if you're applying as an individual artist. So definitely have to pick one of those two. And if you have applied before, just go straight into login. You won't have to create a new, you won't have to register again unless you want to register on another entity. So this is setting up your account login information. And once you are set up, you'll come to this, starting your application. On the left, you can see it says start application there. And then you can also go through your drafts if you have several drafts, or any previous applications that you applied for as well within the last few years. So you can see the close and the active. So that's where you can go in. And if you selected to get comments from panelists within the last few years, go into there and look at what they're saying about your application and take in what they said, and maybe apply that to your application now if you are applying again. And those bottom dates are some really important dates to keep in mind. We understand that the draft review is only 10 days away, but this is a draft deadline, or yeah, a draft review deadline. So if you submit your application in by February 14th, we will review it for completeness, not reviewing it for any of the criteria that the panel goes through. That's the panel's job. So what we're going to go through is if everything is there, if your resume's there, if your artist statement's there, if your work samples all look good, if they all open up, if you have everything. So for completeness. And any application that is not complete will not be moving forward to the panelists. So it's really nice to have that draft review date. So that way, you know, if you accidentally upload 2 resumes, we will go ahead and push that back to you to have you fix that before the March 1st deadline. So all online applications are due March 1st. Don't wait until March 1st to submit your application. But the online application, March 1st, and then the paper application is due February 15th. So that date is coming up soon, just the day after the review deadline, the draft review deadline. And that's to ensure that we have everything in order, so that way we can upload all of your information, upload all of your work samples, so that way it can be reviewed alongside all of the online application. So that's the reason why that review date is just a little bit farther, or I mean, that paper application date is a little bit sooner than the online application. So just keep that in mind if you are applying with the paper application. So this is when you go into start application, this is the instructions tab. So this is where you can also, again, download and print out the guidelines, and then also gives you a nice table of contents for what that looks like. So the instructions, important to know. And then moving forward, this is the cover sheet. Did you want to say anything, Enzina? Okay, we can move to the next slide. We're good. So this is the cover sheet. So this is where the award category, whether you're applying for a fellowship or for a project award, you'll need to know that. And then career stage, you need to know merging, mature, or mid-career. There we go, mid-career. I was like, what's the other one? All right, and then the artistic disciplines. So the 11 disciplines that we have. So if you are within a fellowship, only 5 disciplines this year, 6 disciplines next year. If you're applying for a project award, you will need to pick one of the 11 disciplines. So this is why it's really important to know exactly where you fit into and exactly what you want to apply for, and all of that you can definitely flesh out within the guidelines, having that up. And I'll pass this off to Enzina.
Great. Thank you, Tristan. Sorry about that quick advance. So at the bottom of the last slide, you'll note you select again if you're applying as an individual or as a group. And if you are applying as a group or collective, it will bring you to this page. You will not see this if you are applying as an individual. And the first field you will put in is your group name. If it's an existing group name, that's the name of the group. If it's a time limited or time-based project, your group will just have to come up with a name for that. How many of your group members have a leadership role or have more of an ownership role of the group? And those names need to be included in the application. If it's a group of 2, and both of those 2 people share responsibilities, share vision, they're 2 going to be considered collaborators. 1 has to be the project director, and that is just for the sake of the application. That project director is because we still can only give the financial award to 1 person. So that 1 person becomes responsible for receiving the award and distributing it amongst the group. The others that have more of an ownership role are considered project leads. They still need to be listed, and should that group get an award, just like if they were an individual, they would have to wait 3 years before applying again. We also know that group sizes vary and different roles in groups vary. So it might be a dance group of 5, each member has a strong role. It could be a 60-person choir with 45 members that come and go and don't have are members at large and don't have a really big role and may not stay through the length of the project. So we don't ask for those names, but we do ask you to let us know how many people are in the group. Again, if you have specific questions about group projects or the group award, please just let us know. Every application is required to do a timeline, whether you're applying as a project award or a fellowship. And so this is a timeline that shows the panel that you can do what you're going to do within that year. And this year, a flexible year, but that year, right? They want to know that this project can be achieved and that it's realistic, and that should you receive the award, you can actually make progress. And that kind of speaks to that piece of the criteria of how this will impact your growth as an artist. So having a timeline, we know that timelines are estimates and they may change over the course of the project, and that's fine. If you are applying as a project award, you will also see a page that requires you to submit your project budget. And that project budget must equal $7,500. If your project is more than that, you can include that in your narrative, but you also have to know how you're going to make the difference up of the cost. But this is where you will put different cost estimates. Again, we know these are estimates. It could be equipment costs that you itemize. It could be some of the things I mentioned before. It could be childcare, it could be travel, it could be a conference fee or workshop fee, or etc. So this is where all of the costs will be entered to equate to that $7,500. If you are applying for a fellowship, you will not see this page at all. And then Margaret, this gets to your question about work samples. So every discipline has different guidelines around the type of work samples that you can submit based on the type of work. So literary work has different guidelines, visual arts, performative arts, they all have different guidelines. For all work samples, you need to fill all of the fields. So the title, the medium, how it was made, the year, and the description. If these fields are left blank, you will not be able to submit your application. You could move the application forward, and what happens often is artists forget, or they don't think the description needs to be there, or they think they'll come back. It's 11:59 on March 1st. They hit submit, their application won't submit because these fields are missing. So title, medium, year, description. Year is really important too. As Tristan mentioned, the panel wants to see that you're currently producing work. So work samples have to be within the last 5 years. If your work samples go beyond 5 years, you just need to include in your description why you're including them, because the panel wants to see work that is current. So if you have work that's 10 years old, why are you including this? How does this relate to your project? How does this relate to who you are as an artist now? And then finally submit. So Tristan went through all of those tabs. You can always view your application. We recommend you view it, download it, and save it. It is, I will tell you, as an artist who applies and gets rejected all the time, it is so important to go back to those rejections, to that grant application. And if you receive an award, you definitely want to have that so you can go back and borrow some of that language. So we always recommend you print it out and you download it, you save it. But if you view and download the PDF, it does not mean that it is submitted. So always, always, always hit submit. Tristan emphasized not waiting until the last minute. Even the best platforms can crash when there's a lot of traffic. People have a lot of, your personal system might crash. We had an artist last year who had done so much work on their application. It was March 1st. They had done all the work. They were inputting all of the data. We also recommend working in a different, Word or Notes or whatever you use on your system, working in a different application and then cut and pasting into the application. If something happens with the website, something happens with the portal and it crashes and you haven't saved, all that data could get lost. So work outside of the application and cut and paste in. And then make sure to get that application in early so you're not hitting submit at 11:59 and your Wi-Fi goes out and then comes back on at 12:03 and then you've missed the deadline. And that's just, we have to be equitable across the board, so we can't be lenient about that. So it's a hard deadline. And always save your draft and then submit when you are done. Okay, so we're gonna continue straight on into the narrative plan. And this is where your pen and paper are going to come into play. So the narrative is the written component of the application. We just went over the work samples. The narrative has 4 questions, and then you also have to include a resume and artist statement. And for this workshop, we're gonna kind of dive deeper into 2 of those questions that the narrative asks you to respond to. And the 4 questions that you're asked is to provide a clear and concise overview of the proposal. What is your project? The second is, what will you do if you receive the grant award? What is your project or fellowship focus? So should you get this 7,500 or 18,000, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to apply that to your project? How will this project advance or enrich your growth as an artist? That speaks to that criteria piece of career development, growth, advancement. And then this 4th question is something we added just last year, I think. And it's, why is this work important? So this is an opportunity for you as an artist to speak to why you make art. Why is it important to you? This is where you can show your passion in your work and reflect why it's a compelling idea, why it's a compelling project, and why it's unique to you. Again, the timeline, which we went over, and the project budget for the project award. All of the questions have a word count, so it kind of forces you to be a little bit more concise. And something to keep in mind as we go through this kind of workshop exercise and as you're writing the application is something we call the 5 C's of grant writing. And this is just a really good tool to have as you move forward if you continue to write grants or residencies or other types of applications. And to keep it clear, right, to use language that is clear, concepts that is clear, that if you were to tell your idea to someone who's not an artist and not in the field, they'd understand what you meant. So clear, not confusing language, clear and direct to the point language, concise, that it's not too wordy, it's not too long, it isn't a run-on, right? It's getting to the point in a really clear, again, and direct way, that it's consistent, right? The language you're using is consistent, the storyline is consistent. What you say in your artist statement is consistent to what you're proposing as a project. If your artist statement is all about being a musician and your project is doing painting, there's a disconnect there. So making sure there's consistency all throughout the application, from your resume to your statement, to your work samples, to your project, and that it's compelling, right? Clear, concise, consistent, and compelling. Why is the work important? How can you communicate your passion and the reason why you are making art? And then again, that it's complete. Every year, we encountered a lot of tragedies with incomplete applications. It could be artists that have been working for a couple of months on their application and they think they uploaded everything correctly. We open it to review it and we find out that the document labeled artist statement that they uploaded was a blank document. Something happened when they uploaded it, they didn't check, and that means that their application is not complete and we can't move it forward. So completeness is essential. It's one of the main criterias. Okay, so now we're going to try an exercise. And so I ask for folks to put your cameras on, especially the artists on the call. And we're a small group tonight, so we're not going to do the breakout room. We're going to do this as a group together, but we're going to start a timed kind of brainstorming activity to answer 2 questions that are on the application. And the first one is that first introductory question. Please provide a clear and concise overview of your proposal, a concise overview of your project. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 5 minutes on our own to just brainstorm and write it down and not worry about word counts. If you're not sure exactly what you're going to do, just think about what you want to do, what you could do with this. I'll keep time. So 5 minutes on our own, just write it down. And then we'll pause and we'll take 10 minutes to have folks volunteer and talk about what that brought up for them, talk about what they wrote and ask for feedback. Okay, so I'm going to set my timer. 5 minutes on your own. Provide a clear and concise overview of the proposal. 5 minutes starts now. All right, that is our time. So I'll ask you all to finish up your final thoughts. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask folks if they feel comfortable to share either what they wrote or what came up for them while they were writing that. And for folks on the call, let's give some feedback about what we heard they were saying with what came out or what they wrote. All right, so is there anyone who would like to volunteer?
I will. This is Anne.
Awesome, thanks, Anne.
And I hear a little bit of an echo, but hopefully that'll go away. Okay, it went away. So I've been thinking about this a lot. And my idea is to have a peace garden. And this part of the project is a community art wall. I have a plywood mural that I did. That's a piece of plywood. It's 4 by 8 feet. That I'm going to put up on the wall of a building and use that as inspiration for people to come and have salmon and berries and that sort of thing for people to paint or carve or stain or whatever. To put up for adults and kids in the community, and with the thought that their art would be inspired by the mural, which is basically it's like a distant landscape with a little bit of a closer up landscape in the center. I wish I had a picture of it. That would be included in the application. And so this would address several things. There's a huge lack of community art in Bethel. We've all been shut in during COVID and sort of searching for something to do. And this is a good, like, it's on right on the road, so people can just like drive by and say, "Oh, that's cool. Hey, mom, I did that fish right there," whatever. There's also a high rate of suicide and COVID deaths out here. And so part of this whole project would be like a little message box where people could write a message to their loved one and put it in the box. And then I have a campfire where I would burn the messages once a week or some time. That's sort of a new part of this idea. So we'd work on both healing and looking forward, and just creativity in general. That's what I got.
Great, thank you, Anne. And I just muted you. The echo happens when there's more than one mic on at a time. So hopefully I didn't mute you too early. Awesome. So I have some thoughts, but I want to hear from other folks, maybe Pam or Margaret, if you feel comfortable sharing with Anne what you heard.
Okay, sure, Anne. This is Margaret. Hi, Anne. Nice to see you here. Anne and I actually know each other, so that's why I said that. But anyway, what I'm hearing is that you want to create an art piece that is communal, and that you would allow people to paint. This is the part I'm confused about. Are they painting on your art, or are they painting next to your art, or are you doing art together? I think it's a beautiful idea. And if you could just bring some clarity to that section, then I think you would have a really good summary of what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Margaret. Pam, do you have anything to add to that?
I just was very intrigued by the kind of pay it forward thing and encouraging community art. I think a lot of people find themselves trying to make a goal and not willing to try things because they don't think they're good at it. And this would give them a medium to just play around and have fun and maybe discover something inside themselves that they were actually better at doing than they thought they were. It was kind of what I was hearing was part of the plan.
Great. Thank you so much, Pam. And I'll just add to Anne, one thing to keep in mind is community projects are not allowed, but it is an individual artist program. So when talking about the community project, also include how it will improve your practice as an artist, how it will enrich you as an art maker, how will it advance you. So community projects are definitely awarded. We had a group project last year that was very much community focused, but the artists also talked about their own advancement. So keep that in mind as well.
Can I ask a quick question? So would it be better? This is actually happening on my building right by the road I live on. Would it be better to approach it as more of, this is my individual, because it really is like, I'm going to do this for me. I'm just a very community-based person. And would it be better to sort of focus on the individual part of it and then say, oh, by the way, it's going to be a community activity also? And I'll just mute myself so you can answer that.
Karen, do you have any thoughts to that?
I gotta unmute. Yes, I think if you can frame it where it is something that is something driven by your desires and needs as a maker, and be expansive. I mean, I think my initial reaction was a 4x8 sheet of plywood is really small. And in terms of your budget, you have a lot of there are many more resources that you can use to make this thing a presence. So think about it in terms of your vision and your goals. And then when you talk about the community extension piece of that, that's also part of your vision. So it's not tacked on, it's not like an addition to, it's kind of an integral part of this project. And then I would also in the project description be kind of specific about how you're going to involve the community. Are you going to invite people? Is it just going to be open with, paint laying there? So people have a sense of once this visual field is set up, how are people going to approach it and how are they going to intersect with it? And how is that tied to your mission? Does that kind of make sense?
It does. I have a hard time focusing on myself when it comes to my art. Like, I just want everybody to do it. And so my focus is teaching ceramics, and my focus is getting my friends to come over and do art. So that will be a little bit more of a challenge than I had originally thought. But thank you for that input.
Well, it's clear that you're driven. So it's a matter of like, and the thing is, just making art doesn't have to be your work. You know, maybe your work is creating a community. But instead of thinking about how it's going to benefit the community specifically, it's actually about how it's benefiting your goals. I know that seems backwards and completely counterintuitive, but that's how I would frame it. You have to dig deep. Like when you start doing this writing, it's like, why am I doing this? Like, what is important to me?
Awesome. Great. Okay. Now, next, I'm going to see if Margaret or Pam wants to share kind of what came up for them or share a little bit about the project idea.
I'm happy to share. So ever since I've got to Alaska, I came to Alaska 2 years ago, I've just been fascinated by the tundra and just the different views. And I've been snapping like 1,000 pictures, like, oh, I'll paint that later. Oh, I'll paint that later. Oh, I'll paint that later. To give you a little background, I have a BFA in illustration, but I had a painting minor. And then after college, I just had a bunch of kids, four of them. And then I never really painted again. And I'm starting to paint again now. And I just really like, they're calling to me, these pictures that I've taken, and I want to take even more. And I need to paint them. That kind of sums it up, but I need to paint them, and then I want to share them because when I paint, I kind of romanticize what I see. It's kind of like memory mixed with what I actually see. And when I paint them, you know, when I paint things, people look at them when normally they just drive on by, like downstates. So that's kind of like what I want to do. I want to do a tundra series, and I want to go big, and I want to use oil paint. And so that's why I'm applying for the grant. I mean, I'm going to do it anyway, but if I do it on my own budget, it's going to be small. If I do it on the with the grant money, then it's going to be big, and everyone's going to be able to see it. So that's kind of it. My focus will be on the plants, and then also just the color. I'm kind of obsessed with how color works together.
Awesome. Before I have some thoughts, but before I share them, Pam or Anne, anything you want to share about what you heard in what Margaret was saying?
I'll go ahead. Margaret, I've seen the work that you've put up on Facebook, and it's fantastic. And I am just going to echo, I think it was Karen that was talking about how a 4 foot by 8 foot piece is pretty small. And you and I were in a meeting, Margaret and I were in a meeting, and we're talking about murals and programs and grant funding and big projects. And Margaret said she wanted to do a mural. I really like the idea of a really big piece. And Margaret, you said something, and I missed the part where you said people just drive by and don't look at it. I think you said that people seem to appreciate it more here, but I'm not sure if I got that part of the information. And I think you should go whole hog on this painting idea, because I love your stuff, just a little bit that I saw on Facebook. And if you put it in the community somewhere, I mean, people will absolutely appreciate it. That's my thought.
Well, thank you, Anne, for your encouragement. That's very kind. You know, maybe we'll both get awards and we can just paint big together all summer, right? But thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
I was spinning my wheels here trying to figure out what building you could paint on. And I know a perfect shop that's being renovated right now that needs a wall. So I'm like, what buildings could she put a mural on to beautify Bethel? So that was my hesitation in saying things.
To be clear, for this project, it would be, I'd stretch my own canvases really large and they'd be on canvas. And for this project, I do want to do a mural too, but that would be totally separate from this.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. You know, Margaret, the one thing that I heard, and you clarified this, but I need to paint them. And that I would say, talk about why. You know, we hear that a lot. And as artists, you know, we have sometimes these weird, you know, sometimes I talk about like, it's weird, but I have visions, you know, like I have visions of what things should be and I just need to do them. But artists are often pulled to do something. And I think providing more context about what it is that makes it a need for you to do it. Why are you drawn to that? What is it about the material or the imagery or the content? Talk about that kind of more broadly and concretely so that it speaks to the uniqueness of you as an artist and it speaks to your story as an artist. You know, the information that we give on that application is the only thing the panel has to learn about you and your work. Some panelists will Google folks or look at websites, but they're not required to, and they're not even really encouraged to. So what you put in the application is what they have to learn about you and your story. So be specific.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. I will try to be more specific.
All right, Pam, I want to turn it over to you if you're comfortable, if you wanted to share what came up for you when you were doing that exercise.
Well, I actually came into this more as an information session as far as wanting to help people whose art inspires me. And so I tried to dial it back and figure out who I could impersonate. So I will impersonate my daughter because she was we have a competition dance team out here that we created in 2010. And I'm always thinking of some cool projects that they could do, but my daughter had a very bad injury and they told her she wouldn't dance before she graduated from high school, which they gave her a 1.5 year recovery. And in 6 months she recovered and was dancing again, better than she ever had because she used other parts of her body. And she also taught what we called the baby class. And it was a rhythm and movement class. And she just loved how the little kids sucked it up like energy and they learned so much. And she's always talked about wanting to do sort of a dance class where you would pair, especially for learning disabilities, where you would pair learning with movement, because there is a lot of research that the more neural input of your senses that you put when you're learning something, the more senses you use at that time, how much quicker you can incorporate and she's been talking about doing that for years, creating a curriculum of dance. And she was going to use her own limitations into it and how she had to work around. She had to learn to dance on the opposite. I don't know what you call, not handed, but legged. She learned to turn the opposite direction and things like that because her strong knee was injured. And she wanted to use that sort of how to incorporate dance and learning for children and make it fun so that it became about math and about reading without them even knowing it, so that her dance art, she could pass that on to other people. But I don't know if that fits in here. So that was kind of, I came in not as an artist, as a producer. So.
Great, thank you. Anne or Margaret, any thoughts about what you were hearing?
Well, I feel like she could still apply for a grant in the performance art category, possibly, maybe, but it sounds like, you know, Pam, you just came to support passionate individuals. And it sounds like your daughter really overcame a lot, and that's pretty awesome, but I'm not sure if you're applying for a grant.
No, I'm not. I like I said, I came more to learn and to hear how I could help. There's another artist that I really would love to see succeed, and she is so afraid to step. So I thought if I could, I want to make her do the application, but I thought the more information I had in the background to help her, I could guide her. So that was kind of the focus.
Oh, awesome. So you're going to be like a mentor, help her get through it.
for
I
that.
hope so. I hope so. But now I'm excited because I want her to make textile work out of the painting she does. So on my phone, I've been looking at those printers that can print on fabric and things like that. So I'm going to encourage her to work on a project where she can put her art onto fabric or something along those lines.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and if she, I mean, it is an intimidating process. Every time you start one of these applications, it's just so much blank space and so many things you have to say. So if you want to just reach out to her and say, you know, just have them call the Rasmuson folks and or email, and we can just kind of talk through those early stages and the kind of the feelings that go around with it, and how, you know, sometimes just starting. I had a kid who didn't like writing, and he would draw little scribbles around the edge of the pages as a way of starting. You know, it's not blank space anymore, and half of it is just naming the thing and starting to work. You have a folder on your desktop or in your notebook or your journal where you just start writing these things down. You start collecting images of your work. You start sort of listing your goals. That's part of what this is about also. So just tell her to holler out, okay?
I certainly will. And I think just getting her focused too will help. If she starts the process, I am 99% sure she will not complete it this year, but if I keep at it, maybe she will keep, each time she conquers something, she gets a little more self-confidence. So.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you all so much I know it's vulnerable to ask you all to participate and share with each other what you're doing, but I find it really valuable, and I hope that you all did as well. I'm going to bring us back to the presentation. And we did have another writing activity, but we're running short on time, so we're going to skip it. And kind of keep moving forward. But I would, if I were you, just jot down this prompt. How will your proposal advance or enrich your artistic career and development? And then do the exercise that we just did on your own. And then find someone that you can, you know, in the free write, share that with and say, how did this sound? What did you hear? I think through that exercise, we often find that other people pick up the things that we know and that we think is clear and was just left out because we know ourselves and we know the project too well. We're too close to it. All right, so moving along, the other elements of the narrative are the artist statement, and Tristan's going to start us off talking a little bit about what goes into an artist statement and how you can also make that unique to you.
So the artist statement is similar to the narrative, as you're not explaining what you're doing, but you're on a project scale, but you're explaining what you're doing on as an artist. So as a whole, what are you doing? Who are you? What do you work in? The how, what, why, and I think that the next slide, Zena, yes, that one has all the nice little who, what, where, why, and then also like where to start. So as a practicing artist, you're going to have to create artist statements a lot, especially if you're showing your work within the community and people want to connect to you and want to know why you're doing this, why you decided to be an artist, why you're working in this medium. So it's really important to start with that artist statement and utilize that moving forward. If you don't receive an individual artist award this year, use it for next year, use it for other applications. That artist statement is really important. So where to start? Brainstorms, use all the W's. Who are you? What are you doing? When are you doing it now? Why are you doing it? Not just because I want to, but because I have a very deep cultural connection to it, or I want to explore kind of elements of my emotional space within this medium. So really look at what you're doing and why you're doing it. I wrote an artist statement recently, and it was very difficult for me just to start, just put it on the page. But as soon as I started putting on the page and started going in the who, what, where, when, why, it was a lot easier. So brainstorm, put an outline, throw words onto a page, buzzwords that you can think of that will help kind of make your artist statement stronger. Draft out ideas, have different drafts. So one draft maybe a little bit longer, one draft a little bit shorter, and then edit it to get rid of all of the jargon that's just very vague. You don't want anything that kind of makes the panel kind of question who you are and what you're doing. So this is, again, the only information that they have about you as an artist. So you kind of want it to pack a punch. And then also proofread it, read it out loud, and then reread it, and then also give it to someone else to read. So have all of those elements, and also maybe give it to people who have no idea what you're doing. It might be difficult within our small communities, but maybe someone hasn't heard your project yet, or hasn't heard hasn't heard your project yet and hasn't seen kind of what you're doing as an artist in a whole. They know who you are and they know why you do it, but they haven't seen it written out in very concise language. So have someone else read that as well. And Zena, do you want to add anything onto the artist statement?
Just add, one activity that I tell folks to do sometimes if you just don't know where to start in the brainstorming is just to put everything out on paper, have a brain dump, just put it all out, and then go back to it and look at the words or phrases that stand out to you and circle them. And then use those to build out that structure that Tristan talked about. That's just a real quick exercise to kind of get to the root of who you are, why you're making what you're making, and how you're doing it. You want the panel to leave saying, oh, I know who they are. I know what they're doing. They're a photographer and they're taking landscape images to draw a parallel to the human experience. And they're doing it because they are moved by childhood memories of, being in different places, or, you want the panel to have a good sense of you as an artist.
Also, I'm just going to say, just real quick, when you write the artist statement, sometimes it's really easy to think about me, I. The artist statement is about why you make the work. All of this is going to go back to the work that you're doing. So if you can really focus on that part, I think that'll help you.
So a general statements to avoid something I want to add on to the artist statement as well. Look at other artists' artist statement. Look at artists within your field. Look online, Google how to write an artist statement. That's literally what I Googled right before I wrote my artist statement. I Googled looking at other people's artist statements because I was like, oh, it's been a while since I've written one. Where do I even start? So you have those resources. You have your community who talks about what they do. You have Alaska and as a state, and then you have that national level where you can look at what other artists are saying and what they're doing. And sometimes that language is a bit inaccessible or it's a little fluffy. So really just want to hone in on your voice and exactly why you're doing this work. So general statements to stay away from are, my work is about my experience. We hear a lot of like traditions that are passed down. You start when you're very young. So, I've been drawing since I was 3 years old. I've been drawing for as long as I remember. I've been painting as long as I can remember. A lot of artists do that. A lot of artists just kind of pull from, what they're inspired by. And it's really easy to talk about these things in general, but that's not what the panel wants. The panel wants to know exactly why you're doing this, exactly why it's going to help you. So just general statements to stay away from. Anything that's a little fuzzy and isn't a very concise language. And if you're not sure if it's concise enough, again, reach out to someone else or reach out to Karen. Karen said that she'd be able to provide help with that as well. So just you have all of these resources. So utilize those resources. Anchorage. Alaska is a very community-oriented state. Our artists want to help each other. And that's even true with Pam being here, not even as a practicing artist, but just wanting to propel your artistic friends and artistic community members forward. So we want to help each other out. So definitely look at all of those resources and utilize all of those resources.
Yeah, so, in addition to the artist statement, which is, as Tristan said, that's your story as an artist, right? And I think for a lot of folks who are outside of kind of the written arts, it's hard to tell a written story because your art is your visual story. But the other part of that story of who you are is your resume. And in the application, you can upload a resume that's in a Word document or a PDF, or you can write in a narrative element in the application, enter that into a field. And it's really just a listing of your work, your accomplishments. What have you done to get to where you are as an artist? And we know depending on your craft, it's going to be very different. It's going to be very different with someone who was trained and worked under a mentor versus someone who went to grad school for art, right? That's going to have their resumes are going to look very different. Their work history is going to look very different, but it should have anything that's relevant to yourself as an artist. It shouldn't include things that do not pertain to your art making. So if you're a pilot and that has nothing to do with your art practice, that's just what you do for work, that doesn't go on your artist resume. If you're a pilot that takes aerial photographs and then you do paintings that show your perspective from the air, then you can include that. But if it's not related to your practice as an artist, then it doesn't go on the resume. And your basic resume, if it's following that kind of Western structure, should have contact information, education, or if you were self-taught or worked under a mentor. If you are an exhibiting artist, then list those exhibitions. If you've published, list those publications. And then it should include anything that's relevant to your practice, awards that you've received, grants, fellowships, etc. Capture all of that. If there's any press, anything written about your work, capture that. If you taught, capture that if it's related to your art practice. If you have volunteer experience related to your art practice, capture that. In that artist toolkit that Tristan talked about, we have 3 resume templates. Tristan put those together for us last year. And you can go in there and move things around and make it applicable to you and your work. And all of these headings are going to change based on your specific practice and based on who you are as an artist. If this kind of resume structure doesn't work for you and you really want to tell the narrative story of your history as an artist, how you learned, what you've done, you can write that in as a narrative in the application. So there's a couple of different options to approach this if this kind of structured format doesn't work. And then just some common mistakes. And this kind of applies back to those consistencies, right? We want the work history, the resume to be consistent. If there's things that are really out of order, it's not going to make sense. It's not going to have that consistent thread that runs through your application. You should start with the most recent things first and then go back. So most current and then oldest towards the bottom. Make sure you have your contact information. If something is planned for the future, make sure to include that. Don't include several exhibitions or performances or collaborations that you have that are upcoming without saying that they're upcoming, and include some pertinent information about where, right? And that we kind of talked about that a little bit, but states, countries, cities, make sure you capture the where. So we just wanted to talk real quickly. We're not going to read through all of these, but every year we work pretty hard with the panelists to let them know how important their feedback is to artists. We really encourage them to provide constructive feedback that can help the artist look at the gaps that they maybe didn't see in their proposal. And not every panelist gives feedback, and we just have to be upfront about that. But we do encourage the panelists to do that. And what you'll see in this feedback is that lack of consistency or that lack of clarity. What specifically are you looking to create? Clearly in that application, the artist didn't articulate what their project was in a way that the panelists could walk away from and say, oh, I know what they're doing. Or what does it mean to create a new body of work, right? That speaks to what I was talking about just a few minutes ago about why are you doing it? Why is it unique? What does it mean for you to do this as an artist? How are you communicating your artist story? And then just being really clear, right? again, the application is the only thing the artist has to learn, or the panelist has to learn about who you are as an artist. So be clear, make sure there's consistency. You know, we have here the panelists saying the statement and the narrative or the artist story was compelling and thoughtful, but then the narrative, those other questions weren't clear. There was a little bit too much vagueness. So make sure there's that consistency throughout. And then where's the magic, right? And this is hard because, you know, and when I started applying for shows or writing grants, I would look at who the juror was and look at their work and think about like, ooh, what can I make that they will like? But if you're not, but that's not an effective strategy because we never know what a panelist is looking for, what biases they bring, what a juror is looking for, what they're interested in. And so you really just have to present the best and most complete package of your work and your story as an artist. Think about what this means to you. Why do you do what you do? And then put that package together the best way you can, and then really let go of the outcome. You know, again, this is super competitive every year. The panelists have incredibly difficult decisions, and there are so many artists that are exceptional that do not get awarded. And, you know, we, the folks on the call here, we sit through every panel process, and, you know, I'll speak for myself. I'm real glad that I don't have to make those decisions because it is sometimes painful. And so, you know, we do your best, present your best self, and then let go of the outcome. And, you know, Tristan mentioned, you have all of this down. You can use this to apply for more opportunities in the future. Okay, so next, Tristan is going to talk us through some elements of the work samples, and then we're going to do a quick exercise together.
So for video and audio, focus and clarity, white balance, sound quality, cue and editing. I don't think anyone on this call is utilizing any video or audio, but if you do utilize video and audio within your work samples, make sure that it's focused, that it's clear, that the lighting is balanced out. It's not too dark, not too light. The sound quality is good so you can hear things very clearly. And then this last part, the cue and editing, I think that adding a little bit more element to that, a little bit more information on queuing editing. For video and audio, you can only upload a certain amount, just like you can only upload a certain amount of images if you were doing visual art. So I believe you can only upload like 10 minutes worth of video and audio. So if you do upload a piece and let's say it's 3 minutes long, but you really only need the last 2 minutes, make sure that you either edit it down so that way it's down to 2 minutes, or you put a cue within the description letting the panelists know exactly when to start it so that way they don't go through that 1 minute that they don't need to do. So that's an important thing to remember when you're uploading any video or audio work. Any written work, please make sure that it's neatly typed and clearly reproduced. Proofread it. Follow the guidelines. There are specific guidelines. You can't upload any audio of yourself reading anything. It can only be written work. So for any written application, any written work application, you do have to upload that written work. And then also make sure to choose your excerpts carefully. So you want to make sure that what you give to the panel doesn't need any outside context. They're able to understand what you're saying and how you're saying it within the within your work samples. For online paper, make sure to adhere the guidelines, but then also make sure the track changes is off. We do see that where someone will upload a Word document of their written work and they forgot to turn off the track changes, and we can't utilize that work sample. So you want to make sure that that's also taken off as well when you're submitting written works. And then photo and general kind of tips. If you're presenting work, taking photographs of it, especially for visual art, have a white or black or gray background. So something neutral, something that allows for you to focus in on the piece. Photograph it in natural light. Natural light is nice and flat, it won't give you any glares like studio lights will give you. And there's definitely a lot of resources out there if you do need to utilize studio light. We are in the middle of winter, so we have very little light. We're starting to get more light back, but if you do need to use studio lights, look up resources for how to do that. I remember holding up 2 lamps and having my sister take a photo with my iPhone whenever I was going to school. So there are ways that you can maneuver around, and you can utilize the light sources that you have, and even the backdrops that you have within the space that you have that you're in. And so make sure the lighting is great, make sure everything is cropped down nicely. If there's anything happening in the background, if you don't have a neutral background, just make sure to crop that out. And if you do have access to a professional photographer, maybe look towards utilizing a professional photographer for something like this, or maybe even do a trade. Maybe there's someone in your community who loves some of your work. So I know it's a very traditional way. I've definitely traded a lot with different artists, and even traded time with different artists where we'll do different photographs for each other. So that's something to keep in mind too. There's not anything else added to that. Was there anything you wanted to add, Zena?
No, I just, it looks like Laura just put in the post that portions of Bethel lost power. So we, the folks on the call got dropped. I wonder if we want to, Laura, do you think give a few minutes, or do you think this power outage is going to be extended?
I couldn't say. I feel like when it's happened before, it could be anywhere between half an hour and a few hours. So we are still streaming to Facebook Live right now. And so if we wanted to continue and finish this, people who may have gotten dropped could go there once the power is restored and rewatch the end of it.
Perfect. And we are recording it so we can play it back for folks who missed this part. Okay, so the next activity we're going to do, and Tristan and I will go back and forth, but this is really for visual work samples. So we're going to bring you to, we'll do a test run together. So we're going to bring you to an image, and this will be a test. And I will say, at first glance, do you think this is a good image? Not the work itself. So we're not critiquing the work itself, but the work sample. We'll ask you if it's good or a good work sample or a bad work sample, and you will give a thumbs up if it is good, and then a thumbs down if it is bad. So I'll start us off with this exercise. Do we think good work sample or bad work sample? Okay, I see a couple thumbs down. Absolutely, it is not a good work sample. There are more than one images in this shot, and a work sample has to be 1 image per sample. You're allowed up to 10 total images if you're a visual artist. And this looks like the artist was trying to get around the rules and get more images in there. There's also, we're not sure what we're looking at. The artworks themselves don't look like finished projects. There's all these scraggly ends, like it was ripped out of a sketchbook. So it just doesn't look like a finished product. There are too many images. We're not real sure what we're looking at. Tristan.
Good or bad photo? Looks like we are expecting at least one of our participants to come back. Maybe admit her. She'll come in right in the middle of this good or bad photo. So good or bad photo? It is good. This is a great detail shot. It's clear. The background is neutral. It's you can see all the detail work. So you might want to include a full photograph as well as a detailed shot. You can definitely do that. So this is a really nice close up. Everything's nice and clear. It shows like all the really nice little detail on it. So this is a great photograph, and there's nothing that's kind of distracting you from that as well.
All right, what do we think? Good photo, good work sample, or bad work sample? Good work sample, thumbs up, bad work sample, thumbs down. Okay, I'm seeing thumbs down. Absolutely not a strong work sample. There's too much going on in the image. It appears cluttered. We don't know if this is an in progress. There's paints out. If the artist went in and cropped this to just the painting, it would be a reasonable work sample. It looks pretty evenly lit, but as it is, it does not appear to be finished.
Good photo, bad photo. Good photo. That is the answer. So this is a great full photo of this, the neutral background. The lighting is mostly even, so we have that kind of a neutral background, and also the image is clear, so you can see kind of the dimensions of the work. You know that that's coming off of the wall because of the shadowing in the background, so you can see that you can understand the dimension of the work, and you can you're just focusing in on that, and that's what we want, is that you want to be able to focus in on the work. You want to show exactly, just like with your writing, you want to show exactly what the panel needs to look at.
All right, next one. Good work sample, bad work sample. Yep, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Absolutely, this is a good work sample. And this is a good example of a piece that is installed. It's clear, it shows perspective. We understand that this is intended to be a hanging piece. We can see the details. So if it's important to show that the space that the work is in, you can absolutely take a picture of the work in its own space.
Good or bad photo. This is a great image, but we have so much distraction around it. If it was just cropped a little bit, you would be able to just see the work, and that would be everything that you'd focus on. So would be a great work sample, but it's unfortunately not cropped. So make sure that that's cropped. And also another thing to keep in mind too is the angle that you are taking the photograph at too. There are ways that you can fix that post photograph. But it's a little bit easier to get that kind of nice and centered whenever you're taking a photograph of a visual work.
Awesome. All right. Good work sample, bad work sample. I'm seeing some thumbs up. Absolutely. This is a good work sample. So this is really great at showing detail. It is a three-dimensional piece. So the artist might consider showing another image that shows the full piece, that shows a different side of it. And this is where you could, in that 10 limit, so you have 10 visual work samples, you could have some that are detail shots. Of course, that limits then your total images. But if you really felt it was important to show a detail or another angle of a work, you could include 2 different work samples of one piece. But then again, it does limit your total count.
Good, bad photo. We're cheating a little bit here. We know all the answers. This is a great photo. So this is great, capturing the 2D image while also having the three-dimensional elements too. So the little circle that comes out of the square, you can see that comes out of the image, the 2D image. So that's a great shot of that. And the lighting is nice and even. There's no glare. If there was any glare based off of the material used, everything's nice and even, and it's nice and cropped too. So there's nothing else in the background. So you're able to just really focus in on this work.
Good or bad photo? Yeah, this one is not good. Again, there's a distortion in the angle of the photo. We see the frame, and this is a question that we get a lot about, should I include the frame in the work sample? If the frame is part of your piece, then it should be included. If it is the element that hangs the piece on the wall, if it's just the decorative component, it detracts from the work itself. So we would suggest taking that out of the frame or cropping out the frame, unless the frame is an integral part of the work itself. Otherwise, just focus on the work. Make sure that distortion is correct so that the work looks proportionate. And in the toolkit that Tristan mentioned on our website at rasmuson.org, we have a step-by-step on how to take good images, even with a smartphone, and how to get that distortion appropriate.
Good photo, bad photo. You're going to say bad. This is confusing. Are we looking at the painting? Are we looking at the portrait of the artist? What about the art that's in the background? What exactly are we looking at? So it's a great painting. Again, all of these pieces have been great pieces. They just haven't shown the work in its best light, and that's what you want to put your work on a pedestal and really showcase the talents that we all have as artists. And also the lighting's uneven. So if you want to show an image of your work, you should not be appearing in any of your work samples unless it's crucial to the work sample. If you're a dancer, clearly, or a choreographer, clearly you're going to be within the work sample. But if you are a visual artist like this and you're doing paintings, it's not best practice to take a photograph of you and your picture and then put it as a work sample. That's for Instagram.
The only caveat would be if this artist was doing like diptychs where she was comparing her, the photo of herself with painted images, and that was like part of the body of work, she would include that in the work description or in the artist statement. So it's just confusing. If you just look at this image and you don't have any context, it doesn't make any sense.
All right, so next one, good work sample, bad work sample. Good. So Tristan was just saying, don't take a selfie of yourself with the work unless the body is important to the concept. And this is a performative piece. It requires a body to function. This is the artist. So it's totally appropriate for the artist to be in this image. So this would be a good work sample because it demonstrates the functionality of the piece and gives more of a perspective of how the piece functions. All right, and then the last image that we wanted to show, and we understand that especially now, access to a photographer is challenging, but here are two work samples, one taken by a professional photographer, one taken by the, I think, smartphone of the artist. It's still a good photograph, but you can see how much it's elevated when it's taken by a photographer. And again, we know that not everyone has access to a photographer. That's a barrier. But something that this grant could go towards is a professional photographer to capture the work, to photograph the body of the work, or to photograph a series of works. It makes a difference with how your work is perceived. So we're coming to the end, and we just wanted to throw some kind of overall workshop recaps. Where do you even start when you're working on applications like this? Write down your strengths and weaknesses, kind of plan it out, structure it out, think about what you need to do next, tailor a project that suits you, not the panelists, not the foundation, not previous work, not artists that have been awarded. Make it really unique to you. Something else we also encourage is that you give your package, right? You download it as a PDF and you give it to two friends, one in the arts, one outside of the arts, and you have them review that and give you their feedback. Their feedback will be very different and it'll be really, really helpful. So we always encourage you to reach out to at least two people to review your application. And then keep in mind again, that this is an outside panel. They are not familiar with your work, and to be clear and focused about being able to achieve what you're proposing you're going to achieve. Make sure there's consistency, thinking back to that clear, concise, consistent, compelling, complete. Make sure there's consistency throughout your application. Again, if your application has a community focus, that is absolutely eligible, but also indicate how it will aid to your artistic growth. And then make sure you speak to the uniqueness of you as an artist. Tristan, anything to add to this?
I feel like we've touched on this before, but this is a very competitive grant. There are only 10 fellowships and only 25 project awards, and there's a range between 300 and 500 applications. So the odds are against you, but that doesn't mean that this process isn't important to you as an artist. In order for you to be an artist and to practice your art within the community and within art spaces, you need to continue to talk about your work and talk about how you do things and why you do things. And a lot of artists that are coming in who don't have practice doing that, now's a great time to practice that with all of these steps. So it's kind of robust, but as soon as you break things down and go through the actual application process, it gets easier, and it also gets easier as you move forward, getting other funding and doing other things within the community.
Great, thank you. And then finally, we wanted to provide you with some resources. We mentioned the Alaska State Council on the Arts and the Adaptation and Innovation grants that are active now. The State Council has a ton of resources and other projects that are on hold right now because of the pandemic, but that are super relevant to artists and those working within the arts. And then some other really great resources. Of course, we have our toolkit on the website that includes artist statement, how-tos, resume templates that you can download and use yourself and make it particular to your practice. Secrets of grant writing, how to put together narratives, etc. All of those resources are on our website. You can download and use. And then some other tools here. The CIRI Foundation with the State Council put together a really great resource workbook and grant writing handbook for Alaska Native artists. It's really fantastic. You can download that directly on their website as well. And they have some copies. So I'm sure if you reached out to them, they could mail you some physical copies of those. So we will keep this slide up. We have about 6 minutes left. And so I think right now, we'll take this next 6 minutes and maybe talk about, and I'll just ping around to the folks on the call about some common questions that we get from artists, whether it's around career stage or what type of award, etc. So I'll just kind of open the field here to anybody on the call. If you wanted to share any frequently asked questions that that you get from artists who are looking to apply. Karen?
We do get a lot of questions about budget, how to write a budget and how to account for everything. It's important to be detailed, but not super detailed. So like if you have equipment needs that are specific, you can name the piece of equipment and the price. But if you're thinking about say an installation, you don't have to list the cost of the nails and the plywood and the paint individually. You can just say installation materials. There are a lot of questions about career stages. And if you have a hard time figuring out where you are, talk to people who know you, and then give us a call or an email. And you have to feel comfortable about where you locate yourself with that one.
Great, thank you, Karen. Anyone else, any frequently asked questions come to mind?
I don't think it's a question, but we have been seeing a lot of sentiment around artists not feeling like they're artists, because this is very competitive, and also a lot of people think of fine art, like visual art, like oil paintings and things that are up in the Anchorage Museum, and it there's just so much more to art than just painting, I say as a painter. So there's just so much that you can apply under the individual artist awards. And one thing that I completely thought I forgot about were just traditional dancers. Traditional dancers can apply under individual artist award, and because it's so ingrained within the culture, a lot of people don't consider that within the same kind of competitive space than a lot of these what they think of in terms of Rasmussen and art, kind of like museum installations. It's so expansive. It's so much more expansive than that, and it's just really important for us to look at art in various forms, but then also to empower artists that are practicing in various forms. Um, so that's one thing to keep in mind is that uh, the arts and culture within Alaska is so rich and so diverse, that it's really important to empower each other, and for us to empower you within this process. So if you don't think you're a practicing artist, but you are still interested in the individual artist awards, chances are you're an artist. So don't doubt yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tristan. Laura, anything to add? Any questions that come to your mind?
Not really a question, but just a common theme from artists that I've been talking about when we speak about like an artist statement, an artist resume, the questions like, why do you do what you do? And it does come back to statements like Margaret made, where she's just like, I just feel compelled to do this. And statements of people just saying, just like, I just love what I do and I need to create it. And I feel like tapping into that is the heart of what you're doing is can really resonate throughout your application. And so all of the things, I'm so grateful for all of these resources and the detailed portions of the applications that we're working through, because they are so important. But just remembering to tap into the heart of it and the why, I think is important too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, Karen, one more thing.
Yeah, I was looking through notes from other workshops that we've led, and some people ask if they can apply for both a project and a fellowship, or apply as a visual artist and a musician. You can only apply in one category and in only one grant type. So that's important.
Awesome. Absolutely. And I said this already, but I'll say it again. Pick what best relates to who you are as an artist. If you are an emerging artist but want a bigger grant, don't apply for a fellowship as a mid-career, because that will reflect in your work. It will reflect in your work sample. It will reflect in the statement, etc. So be true to who you are as an artist and apply within the stage that's appropriate, within the discipline that's appropriate, and for the project that's appropriate. And finally, we'll wrap it up. This is our contact information. We all have access to this email, arts@rasmussen.org. You can email us there, and Karen will likely be your first point of contact, but we are all available to answer questions. Laura at Bethel Arts Council is also available, and her contact was put in the chat. So please reach out to us if you have any questions. And we'll just close this by acknowledging how powerful and impactful artists are, and how what the work that artists do is so valuable and adds to the richness of our lives, and adds to the vibrancy of Alaska and reflects that in the work. And so we are so grateful for the work of artists. We believe in the work of artists, and we will continue to support the work of artists. So thank you all for what you do. We'll close it out with that, unless anyone on the call has anything else to add. No. All right. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your time with us tonight. We look forward to your application.